Happy Wealth Wednesday. Beth, I'm so excited to have you here. You're really an inspiration, your work within the private fund space and just finance in general, even with your background previously in private wealth. So very excited to have you here today. I would love if you would kick us off just explaining a little bit about yourself and your background.
I am currently focused on helping companies make the most of their data to monetize it and build data-driven processes and data-driven products, a lot of times with advanced analytics. And I was led to that by initially starting as a trader at Goldman after going to MIT for graduate degree, starting a hedge fund and landing at a private equity fund. And the past 20 years has kind of been a mix of being a deep diligence investor and having a real data orientation and a decision system focus.
Super exciting. I'm really excited to hear what your first ever investment was. And if you remember, what got you started.
I think it's twofold. One, my biggest, and I think probably most impactful investment was getting my MBA and just putting myself through school to get recruited to get to Goldman. And it was a huge risk at the time. And I was the first one in the family to go to college, let alone put myself in debt to go to graduate school. It was necessary. I had to pay to play is the way I explained it. More technically, once I got to Goldman, I remember specifically there were these Seadrill bonds. Seadrill is an oil services company that I thought were great risk reward, had a great return, timing was good, would be worth pounding the table on. And so I diligently wrote up my entire thesis and presented it to the trader. It got put on the books and luckily it ended up working out. But that first investment you do is that you're just always concerned, whether it's for work or for personal, that's just not going to work. And you just have to start somewhere. My thought is there's no right answer. And as long as you're thorough in your analysis and you're honest, nobody knows. And so everyone's just making their best get. And I guess everyone that tells you otherwise is not being truthful. So.
And how did you even get into the space of wealth management and finance more broadly?
Yeah, I remember exactly where I was when I was 19 years old when I fell in love with the markets. And I was reading the newspaper and reading the headlines. And I'm like, I wanted to really follow the numbers and follow the data to figure out what was truly going on. And I wanted the best possible access to information I could. And I love the markets because it was like a mix of psychology and sociology and macroeconomics and natural resources, so many pieces all combined together. And my view, it was like the great truth equalizer because there was so much money at stake that the truth would have to come out. And so it became just like a really long process of education of what that meant and then positioning myself to get somewhere where I could truly be trained and have the best quality access to information. And so, it was a long process, but it was worth it.
What role do you play in the wealth space and why is it important?
Currently. So, I transitioned relatively recently, I've always had like a hybrid role as both an investor and a data-oriented operator of either building a business or improving the operations of a business or analyzing a company. And now functioning as an operating partner. So I'm making the most of private equity firms' investments by helping their executive teams make the best decisions they can. And I do it from a data-driven perspective.
What do you think is the most exciting thing you've learned and that you would want others to know?
I think finance generally is intimidating. There's a lot of jargon, there's a barrier to entry. Something that Eve does really well when you attend your circles is just talk about the emotional link that we, especially as women, have to money. And that just adds a whole nother level of complexity to what's already a really hard problem. And so I think with everything, it's just trying not to be intimidated, breaking into pieces, taking it one step at a time. And like I said, realizing that no one has the right answer. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned in probably in all complicated problems, of which, wealth is just one of them.
And is there a person or a company that inspires you right now and why?
Yeah, so I am currently working for kind of changed my focus a little from financial data to healthcare data. And it's obviously so timely with everything that's going on in the world. Health is such a forefront, and also with just the mushroom exponential growth of the amount of healthcare data that's out there. And one of the reasons why I chose to do it is the founder is a Harvard epidemiologist who was like a big tech guy in the 2000s and decided to focus on kind of like better healthcare decision making. And so I'm really inspired by this idea of using data to make better healthcare decisions. And, as it relates to, you're only able to do that if the company is run well and if they're growing. And if they're like doing what they've promised to their investors. And so everything kind of ties back to finance. They needed the capital in order to succeed. They needed to prove themselves in order to get more capital, in order to make this big difference in the world. And so just linking the fact that these investments you're making are tied to companies who are functioning and doing things and employing a ton of people that then can then feed their families. Like, it's bigger than just kind of like numbers on a piece of paper and returns.
And what advice would you give to somebody getting started? You recently did actually talk, all of us together, on portfolio allocation. I liked some of the framework you shared. And I think especially on thinking about how to get involved in more private opportunities or private funds where you've spent a lot of time, how to evaluate those things and trade off between, public and private.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, asset allocation is one way of saying it. I would say the other thing, and I've spent like 20 years focused on it, is another way of saying is risk management. And so like just thinking about, the different components that make an investment, breaking into pieces so you can compare one to the other, understanding your specific need. And so that is volatility. Like something goes, crypto goes up 100% and down 50%. Can you handle that? That is liquidity, which private investments, you might have, they say hopefully 5, but it could be 10 years until you get your money back. And the same thing with real estate. Like, there are positive things about it as well, but is the potential return you can get worth that? And are you set up in a way where if you want, that you can just assume the money's not going to come back? And, I think 3 is downside. I think, all equities, private or public, private equity or public equities, can go to zero. A company defaults. I see it all the time in my business where the bonds end up getting the keys and the equity gets very little or nothing. So just, can you lose the money you're investing? And, and then the last piece is just your return, your upside, and comparing that upside with all those other considerations when you're making your decision. I think in a lot of the EVE conversations, we spend a lot of time like looking at things that are cool and interesting. And, the only other thing I would say is like the most fun, sexy stuff might have some place in your portfolio, but, it might not be like what you want to be the largest percentage.
Absolutely. It's like that bound of, passive and active strategy, and knowing how much you want in each bucket, and, an awareness that the active strategy is often like extremely, extremely difficult, if anything, sometimes even more entertainment.
Exactly. And difficult is a good point. Like, and I think Eve makes, like through the sessions, just makes a very good point about how so few people do beat indices and who you're up against and the resources they have when making these calls. And so, those are all really important considerations.
And is there anything else we should know? How can we follow you and what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. It's Beth Pollack is my name. The name of my company is K Means Capital. It's an advisory firm. I think that is probably the best way to find me. We're hanging out in an EVE circle here or there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared, and so appreciative to have you in the EVE circles and just to follow your journey, especially as you move now into healthcare and bringing a lot of your incredible skill set on data and making good decisions to a really special, important space. So thanks, Beth.
I mean, and thank you too, because this is so needed to just like demystify personal wealth for all people, but especially for women. And, it's so critical to just have a safe place that's also super well informed to provide the resources to help people get to where they need to be. So, congratulations, and looking forward to see how EVE grows in the future.
Thanks, Beth.